Hey, this is Sabrina, Monarch of Monarch Astrology and Magic of the Spheres podcast, and I'm bringing you a deep dive astrology forecast for July 8th to 14th, 2024. I'm going to share with you a brief overview and then go into everything in a lot more detail and depth. So we have Mercury in Leo and Jupiter in Gemini sextile each other this week, and then they each aspect the lunar nodes in Aries and Libra. We're going to notice maybe some ways that absurdity has entered the chat, hopefully some playfulness along with it. And so this is heightened, this element of absurdity. And it's having us reconsider our typical rules of engagement, where it seems like reality is looser in some of the places that we used to think of it as more rigid and solid. So it might be changing how we initiate actions or interact with people when this absurd element enters the picture. Essentially, there are possibilities, and we might be thinking more creatively about them. Venus in Cancer is making alignments to Uranus and Neptune before she enters Leo, and then also aspects Pluto when she's in Leo. So Venus is effectively speaking to all the outer planets, the transpersonal planets this week, which means that our relationship themes, whether it's happening out in the, out socially, intimately, or it's something that you're navigating within your own heart space, these things are all striking much deeper chords this week. Subtle energy can be involved also. And while these themes are playing out in very human ways, the more than human or beyond is also constellated. So that's like the raw forces of nature, more spiritual or energetic breakthroughs in our relationship to this archetype of Venus, which relates to connection, resource, and reception. So even, anything that we're doing to understand our relationship to God or our relationship to our deep unconscious, like these mysteries, is what the transpersonal planets take us to. And isn't Venus a gateway into that material that is so, so beyond? So that's going to be a theme this week. And then also the Sun in Cancer and Saturn in Pisces trine one another, adding a tone to the week of cultivating, nesting, or more specifically, gestating realities, right? Like creating these little protective reality bubbles. Like when you create an art project in private, or you have like a ritual that you're doing, when you're creating like a space for something magical and a little bit rarefied. So as an ongoing theme for Cancer season, we're examining how we protect and feed life itself, right? And that which is precious. And this is a matter of proper boundaries and understanding what we deeply need, or for what and who we're protecting, what they deeply need. And, it can be anticipated also that knowing what we need is a journey of also experiencing not having or lack or feeling like a boundary has been impinged upon. So finding our needs is actually very emotional because we can feel these go deep, right? I was talking about unconscious themes for the week, but it's like being an infant, or these pre-verbal memories of having these intense needs and having the experience of the needs being met or not. But this week we might be invited to approach this tender process constructively, right? Sun Saturn wants to create something responsibly. And here it's working with the waters of the unconscious. So before I get into the week in more detail, I want to share an announcement. Let me share my screen for that. I'm running a Kickstarter to ask for your support for the year ahead of the free content that I share, both on this YouTube channel, which, by the way, if you're watching this on YouTube, please like this video, leave a comment at some point, and subscribe. Maybe you're on my mailing list and you receive these in written version. Maybe you listen to Magic of the Spheres podcast, my solo episodes, my interviews there. But I've been, Monarch Astrology just turned 9, and I forget how old Magic of the Spheres podcast is. It's something like 5 or 6. So I have my 2 young children, and here, what I've been sharing through these mediums, through my channels, is really high quality, inspiring, uplifting, depth content. I'm a Mercury in Pisces. I like to speak to subtle things. I like to speak to the nature of the water that we're swimming in at any given moment. I like to speak about things that maybe haven't gotten adequate language put to them, so that when you hear what I'm speaking about and pointing to, that it strikes these chords of remembrance, that it opens up something meaningful in your life. Um, and of course, everything I share for free on the internet is really a bat signal to attract soulmate clients, students, community. It's been an enormously fulfilling thing here. But what I create, this free content, it's kind of like a complete offering in of itself. It's not really behind a pay gate. So this Kickstarter is a way to just really deeply, sincerely ask for your support and reciprocity if you love this content, if it has value in your life, to back it and to, anything counts, everything matters. I'm looking to have 157 or more backers to match what I had the last time I ran a Kickstarter. That time we made $31,905. I've set the minimum goal here for Kickstarter at 24,000, but of course, anything more than that is amazing and excellent. What else did I want to say about this? Well, right now we're at 20 backers. We crossed the 4,000 amount. I had an alumni of the Evolutionary Astrology Intensive in my advanced programs decide to retake the Evolutionary Astrology Intensive for the joy of it and to deepen into evolutionary astrology. I also had someone add extra to their pledge to scholarship someone for the Glamour Magic course. So yesterday was a big breakthrough in the campaign, just in terms of these really heartfelt, generous. No, that's what I was saying earlier, is that if you have the means, I encourage you to be, as I'm saying, a little bit spicy, a little bit generous to how you give to this campaign. If you have, just a small amount to give, that counts too. I'm offering a lot of rewards through the Kickstarter, different talks that I'm excited about, like this Struck by Lightning talk. You can, go to the page and read more about all these things. I'm offering astrology readings, and I'm also offering a new Glamour Magic course. I'm going to talk more about this at the end because I want to get back to the forecast and respect your time here, but I would really invite you to stay at the end and hear a little bit about what Glamour Magic means to me, why I'm teaching it. With the Kickstarter, I really love to teach new things. Everything I'm teaching through the Glamour Magic course is Pluto inspired. It comes from my direct experience. It's Venus inspired. So it's like an offshoot of my work with astrology in an applied way, but with this really important and fun frequency. It's not just about feeling beautiful, which of course many people want to feel that way. It's about freeing your life force from the negative enchantments and negative magics out in the realm of beauty, and having that power to feel luxurious in your own essence, which I feel is actually really important. And then I'm also offering a high discount, $1,000 off to the Evolutionary Astrology Intensive. And this is beginning again in early October of this year. And the Evolutionary Astrology Intensive is a beloved program. Hundreds of students have passed through it to learn evolutionary astrology in a deep, enchanted, and also very structured way. What I really do in this course is help you have your own relationship to the archetypes, learn how to put it together, but really learn how to see astrology for yourself as an intuitive relational practice, as opposed to a book learning or memorization practice, like how to be friends, how to know these archetypes. And evolutionary astrology is special in that it's extremely soul focused. It's Pluto and the lunar node focused. And you gain this ability to look at your natal chart or look at natal charts from the perspective of being a soul on a multi-lifetime journey. And so what are you learning in this life? What have you brought in from prior lives that you're still resolving? And what is the soul level assignment of this incarnation? These teachings, this form of astrology, is pretty much at the foundation of how I live my life too. The the logic, like understanding how soul works, informs a lot of how I navigate my day-to-day life in a magical way, in a way where I'm grounded, I'm experiencing my earth life, this current personality, this current incarnation. But when I feel that pulse of the soul moving through me who wants to change and shape and expand and evolve my life, I know how to hear that. I know how to see my patterns inside of that, because of this language. So I can't stress enough how life-giving and how profound this wisdom tradition is. And then you can also bundle the Glamour Magic course and the Evolutionary Astrology Intensive together. And the Kickstarter is set up also so that you can add on the other rewards too if you want to get multiple things. So I'm going to get back to the forecast now. So on July 8th, we have Venus in 26 degrees of Cancer, sextile Uranus in 26 degrees of Taurus. And that's at 7:04 a.m. Eastern. By the way, the times and dates of these transits, I include them so that you can know, but do know that these transits, they are wave patterns. And so you feel them coming and you feel them leaving too. So Venus-Uranus transits bring novelty, change, the weird and unexpected, the unconventional to our world of love, resource, sensuality, and relationships. I just put Uranus and Venus together. So Cancer and Taurus, the signs here, can be very familiar and cozy signs, working together for themes around homemaking, nesting, food, leisure, like feeling good. And at a very basic level, the transit could be an encouragement to spark new sensual pathways outside of our routine ones. So that, I mean, is like finding new ways to experience joy and pleasure. But I would also add here that it enlivens us, like it creates more ability and space within us. If we have the ability to also be with discomfort or experiences that we don't prefer, because I think Taurus especially gets very preferential. It's like we have our routines, the foods we like. And so you can end up being very habitual, and habit, while stabilizing, while creating a kind of homeostasis, can sometimes become a limitation also. So there might be some encouragement here to just shake things up. And then more psychologically, I think there's something here around attachment styles, i.e. anxious, avoidant, secure. Taurian here in the way that Taurus deals with security and being at a state of homeostasis in the body. Uranus also deals with trauma, which is relevant here in terms of attachment trauma. And this is a Cancerian topic as well in terms of just attachment and bonding. Attachment styles is something that I've noticed many people become more literate about in the last several years. Just recently I encountered, like, I'm hearing people talk about attachment styles in these like highly intelligent ways that's really sparking me, because they're having me think about anxious patterns or avoidant patterns in ways that I hadn't thought of before. And it just creates these light bulb moments. So I think there might be some new perspectives or realizations occurring around this time around our relationship to attachment, what's triggering it, and how we're navigating these themes in newer and more aware ways. And attachment isn't always triggered by one-to-one relationships. It can be triggered by environments that we're in or desires that we have. It's not just happening in that narrow kind of way. And then another way that we could think about this Venus and Cancer sextile Uranus and Taurus transit is that there's some discovery unfolding around our needs and how we source them. So needs being Cancer, sourcing them, resource being Taurus. Knowing what we need in the first place, that emotional intelligence, and developing the self-confidence and self-esteem to resource those things in an empowered way is huge, right? So it's one, knowing what you need, owning, claiming that you need that, and having empowered ways to receive it, as opposed to not knowing what you need or kind of knowing what you need, but feeling shame about it and feeling furtive or sketchy about how you go about it. So not knowing what we need or being too disempowered or ashamed to address needs creates many issues around care and resource, right? So what we're really doing what might be the breakthrough with this transit is just stabilizing a deeper level of self-worth, a deeper level of knowing that it's okay to have needs, and just stabilizing that in the body so it's not such an edge to have a need. So moving on to Mercury, Mercury in 9 degrees of Leo, sextiling Jupiter in 9 degrees of Gemini the same day, a few hours later, 10:26 a.m. Eastern. I'm in Greece now, by the way, but I'm using Eastern because a lot of my audience is in the States. I know it's global here, but I just was like, I'll compromise. I came from Pacific, we'll do Eastern now. Anyway, in moments, Jupiter in Gemini faces us with the absurd. Maybe you've noticed, right? Absurd, defined by Oxford as, quote, wildly unreasonable, illogical, or inappropriate, end quote. And, quote, arousing amusement or derision, ridiculous, end quote. So, I mean, have you noticed that around? Leo and Gemini harmonize well because Gemini is relatively aware of the absurdity of things. Oh, my cat's waking up from a nap on the desk. See, okay. It's like, I'm gonna have to pause this video. Anyway, Leo and Gemini, they harmonize really well because Gemini is pretty aware of the absurd. And then Leo is playful and humorous. And so the two of them together will just roast the weird situation happening in front of them. And then at a deeper level, there can be some cognitive openings, like it's Mercury sextile Jupiter. So it's actually like a big think kind of transit. It's an expansion in our perception. It's a wisdom expansion even too. Just Mercury and Jupiter, right? So there might be some cognitive openings here that are supported by the absurd. And what I mean by this, recently I encountered this in the form of experiencing a similar situation that I've been in many times for years in my life. That would cause me distress. But there were some new variables of the situation that made it absurd. So absurd that I could see it from a different vantage point and have a significant shift of awareness that would not have been possible had all the variables stayed kind of reasonable, grounded, and normal. So just noticing, a sensible, noticing when the presence of the absurd lets you, flip things on their head a little bit, look at things from different angles and how generative that actually can be. Of course, there's some situations that we would hope ideally had more sensibility as opposed to absurdity, like things around politics or the election, for example. When the absurd enters those realms, it's not necessarily met as a welcome guest. However, look for where the presence of the absurd is a catalyst for creativity. Absurdity highlights that reality can be fluid, and that perhaps rather than us depending on things being baked right in the oven all on their own, that we can be creative in molding the dough, so to speak, if you follow my metaphor. I don't know about you, but I've witnessed people and myself get creatively inspired and empowered once they realize that what already exists around us is not eternal, set in stone, and not always even that godly. Like everything is God in some sense, but when you see that there's some things out here that are just like absurd. And when you see that, if it galvanizes a part of you to show up different. So this can raise another important point, which is a need for heart, Leo, in these situations, the presence of the absurd or the presence of moral relativism or a kind of chaos, anything goes kind of space. It does not necessarily mean we need to join in that same way. Instead, it could be like the vibe of someone creating quality work in a field that is proliferated with charlatans, or a person who chooses to treat people at a higher standard, even though there's a lot of lower behavior around them. It's seeing the absurd and not necessarily being as absurd. Letting the absurd reflect back to us how absurd it is that we're holding back something valuable in an arena where bad actors, so to speak, are equally empowered to participate. And this does not have to be about self-righteousness or anything like that. It's just noticing that if things are absurd around you, Are you holding something back valuable or of greater substance or meaning, and why? Then Mercury in Leo at 10 degrees trines the North Node in 10 degrees of Aries, which of course means it's sextiling the South Node in Libra at 4:46 p.m. So this transit, Mercury sextile the North Node, Mercury in Leo sextile the North Node in Aries, fire signs, it's encouraging expression. I most viscerally noticed it the other day when two native Cretans, I still feel weird about that word, but people from Crete, separately but on the same day, urged me to speak, say it, when they noticed that I had something I was holding back from saying. Not to mention a friend had a dream of me where he could tell that I was holding back from saying something, and he told me about this. So it's interesting, like, that this was in the field. And when I look at this transit, here's how I universalize it. But I connected back to the transit because Mercury in a fire sign trying the just do it kind of North Node in Aries says a lot about, shooting from the hip with our words, just going for it, not worrying as much about it being tactful or polite, which would be the, I apologize. Mercury in Leo is trine the North Node in Aries. I did say sextile. It's the sextile to the South Node in Libra, on the other hand, that's speaking more of that trying to make things tactful and nice. Given that Mercury harmonizes with both of the nodes, it will speak to the ways that Aries and Libra are really two sides of the same coin. Honesty or more impulsive expression is not mutually exclusive from good relationships, tact, or charm. I have a friend where I was talking about charm with and politeness, because he was mentioning some of his perspectives on politeness. And I was like, wow, I'm not as polite. And when I'm going to talk with someone about something or like try to make a new friend, I'm very forward and I'm very Aries. And he was like, maybe that is your charm. Like, you don't have to change that. And so there can be something charming about Aries in its innocence, in its willingness to just say something. Aries and Libra really work together to have autonomy and self-expression in the same room as charm and connection, that it can actually support connection and aesthetic and beauty to be more instinctually Aries expressive. And all this being said, there may be some concern or effort about being regal, noble, or dignified with one's words and speech, because it is Mercury in Leo. And so that might be what Mercury in Leo is a little concerned about. July 9th, Jupiter in 10 degrees of Gemini will sextile the North Node in 10 degrees of Aries, and also in so doing, trine the South Node in 10 degrees of Libra at 6:03 p.m. Eastern. So Jupiter aspecting the nodes, right? We have the Mercury-Jupiter sextile, and they're both aspecting the nodes. But this alignment here may highlight the way it takes a little bit more effort to be direct, honest, and to speak to the point of something. And I'm saying that because Jupiter relates to honesty, and it's sextiling the North Node in Aries. So sextiles, we have to apply some effort. So there's something here about communicating honestly, but that taking some effort. As opposed to letting charm, evasiveness, politeness lead events more indirectly. It highlights here subtle forms of dishonesty, white lies, or partial or honeyed or concealed truths. And some of this is socially convenient and a form of socially accepted manners, culturally informed and specific to particular cultures in terms of what's considered polite. It could be like a neighbor deflecting invitations to socialize due to being too busy, instead of outright saying, I have no desire to connect with you. Please don't invite me to anything again. It's like, oh, I can't, but maybe next time. And how much softer it is to pick up the subtle cues of deflection and let it just be left at that. It may be more of a limitation or problem in our lives where there is a deeper desire for fire and presence to enter the connection, where we don't want that wispy, washy, like half truth, half lie thing. We just want out with it. And there might be some pressures in some places to stop being polite and evasive and be direct, or we might be applying that pressure, right? And um, it's an interesting one, right? Because you can see some things happening below the surface and you can be okay with it. Or you might press and be like, but what do you really mean? Right. And just noticing creatively where that's really important. Then Pallas Athena is stationing direct in 19 degrees of Scorpio at 10:46 p.m. Eastern. I don't always forecast the asteroids due to there being so much to look at, but stationing planets or stationing asteroids, they kind of like focus and dial in an energy or a frequency that can be really felt at the moment of the station. Pallas Athena relates to creative intelligence and strategy. She's very cunning and she knows how to hit the target that she's looking for. In a mundane way, she's worldly strategy, which can be like navigating hierarchies in a workplace, and the type of intelligence and strategy that one employs to climb and advance through them. Spiritually, I find her deeply connected to visualization and energy work, even, and the way that through energy meditations, things in reality can change. This is like mindset work that athletes or business people engage in, perhaps spiritually, but maybe even not so much, to influence the course of events in their endeavors. And the visualization of a perfect, it's like the visualization of a perfect game before the game. It's creating the energy pathways for what you want to happen. And you have to think about the type of intelligence that's that focused and that committed to winning that will do those things. So let's put her in Scorpio. Scorpio is about merging and exchanging power and resources, becoming more than the sum of your parts through the alchemy of deep, intimate relationship, whether that's with people, with a kind of business entity, with an institution, with an energy, with a teaching. It's the quality of merging with something and the power within that. Ideally, we're creating win-win situations with Scorpio, where each party is mutually empowered by the exchange. Of course, we know it's not always this way, and many dynamics can be win-lose, extractive kind of dynamics, or mutually lose-lose toxic bonds. Pallas Athena stationing and coming into focus here in Scorpio may have us reflecting on how we are participating in energetic exchanges and what we might want to do to have a better experience. There is mutual implication with Scorpio, meaning that both parties are participating. It's not just one. Negative social interactions can point us to our own shadow lessons or lessons that we're learning spiritually, and personal adjustments to be made. In practice, there's really only there's some ways to exclude this and not make it about, what did I do to call this in? Because sometimes that can be like a self-flagellating, self-punishing behavior and like miss the actual responsibility of how was I involved in this? But when you're seeking greater power, like when you want to be a more empowered person, you have to take better responsibility for these things that are, just happening out there. Other people are doing it. It's like, well, how are you a part of it? If you want to change the dynamic, if you want a different experience, don't depend on other people to change, like change how you're relating. An avoidance of this introspection and internal alchemy can result in the same situations happening over and over again, but with different characters and faces, playing the same stories over and over again. So if you want to change it, it's like, can you creatively, intelligently see your part in it? July 10th, 2024. Sorry, we already know the year. The sun in 19, I always just extra emphasize this because every few years someone is upset that they watched a forecast from some years ago and they thought it was now. But the sun in 19 degrees of Cancer trines Saturn retrograde in 19 degrees of Pisces at 11:04 p.m. Eastern. I took a deep breath because this one there's some layers to it. But there's a creative reckoning here around illusion and fantasy, the Pisces part, and the constructive use or misuses of it. Cancer and Saturn each have this ability to create worlds with boundaries. So you can, for example, create a protective bubble around you in a meditation, or you can create a home life that has a particular experience and standards within it, right? Like you're creating a realm with its rules of operation and standards and boundaries. The bubbles that are created here can function to an extent. They are not entirely objectively immune from the outside world, but they can deeply limit the outside world. And I think that's the inherent vulnerability of any of these bubbles and whatnot. It's like, for the most part, um, ideally the protection works. But the idea of protection is that it's protecting from something on the outside. So that's where maybe the danger or the outside or whatnot is constellated. And the bubbles are here to serve a particular experience or to gestate something. I think I've been talking about this a lot in Cancer season, where it's like, families create a protective bubble for their children, ideally, right? Protecting them from things of the outside world that are not age appropriate, or protecting them from things, and that wisdom and discernment of what to educate them about, what to protect them from until they're older, etc. We might do this psychologically in the ways that we maybe resource ourselves to feel empowered to move through our day, even though we're dealing with something really heavy or difficult, that if we let it consume us entirely, we would be unable to perform life, right? So like these bubbles, these compartmentalizations, they're a natural function of these archetypes. And then the question I have here is how and if what is formed in the bubble interacts with the outside world or becomes something real, or how the emotions and sensibilities formed inside the bubble influence concrete actions out in the outside world. Right? So it's like, if you, I was talking about this with a friend recently who got super into Jane the Virgin, which is like a telenovela on Netflix, and I love it. And it brought up the conversation of like women and romance books, or romance, like getting stuck into a romance series, and how you can criticize that as like, oh, it's all fantasy. But if it helps you have an emotional opening, if it helps you connect to your heart, if it opens how you interact with the world, I mean, those can all be positive things. There is an element of, and I talk about this a lot in my talk on this channel about Saturn and Pisces, how there's always multiple realms that are happening at once. There's like cold, hard, like what normal life, like reality is, and that we're always going into these side channels of imaginative, otherworldly realities, in terms of even like a sports game, even watching a movie. Like we're entering these kind of other states that are less real, but still interacting with the main real reality. And so the question really is like how these realities are talking to one another. Because if there's it can be highly dysfunctional, I guess, to have a fantasy bubble that is so at odds with the normal reality and that they're not integrating, as opposed to the creative use of entering into these creative or altered states and then weaving things from that into one's life, which is a creative way to live. Right? And you might spend a lot of time in a nutritional meditative state, for example, cultivating subtle energy in your body. And surely this affects your external outside life. I've been thinking a lot lately about practices, how like it's been some years now, like I think it was shakier or harder to introduce it, of just like feeling like I had to discipline myself or make it happen or whatever. But these days I find that every day I'm doing some kind of like learning a new movement pattern, learning a new stretch, like doing some kind of breath work thing, doing some kind of physical practice to like cultivate energy in my body, just because I like it. And the accumulation of it over time, creates aliveness and wellness. And so those are bubbles. It's like when I go into these altered states to connect with my tissues and move energy and whatnot, um, that's a supportive bubble to enter. It integrates. Um, But then we have some issues and like going back and forth between the uses and misuses. Um, when reality itself feels limited in a really, uh, whether it's true or not, whether there actually are no possibilities or there are possibilities. Um, so no possibilities meaning situations of enslavement or imprisonment, for example. Um, there might be possibilities, situations of there is freedom, there are opportunities to access, but maybe we don't fully see them or feel empowered to go for them. But, inside of desperate situations, inside of situations where there is no power, where there is no freedom, including for children, right, who are stuck in their situation with their families, like have a certain concrete material limit of power of being a child, that inside of that imprisonment, enslavement, being a child, these situations of deep limitations on freedom, that fantasy will become a place of survival. It can be a place of nutrition, a place of hope, a place of manifesting a better future. And this takes many different forms. Like visualizations about your life of freedom as you're preparing to find some way to escape the limiting experience. Children who have a difficult time making friends or belonging in school, reading fantasy books at lunch. These fantasy patterns promote emotional survival or sustain something in the psyche that would probably not be able to live under the harsh conditions of focusing on reality alone. Because we've been talking so much about like Cancer season and pre-verbal things, it is worth mentioning that, emotional complexes can form really around fantasy, where fantasy becomes a way for part of the soul to stay alive, but it can become a psychological issue later in life, right? That part of us that um, escapes into Rapunzel and Disney castles and stuff, imagining that a magical future is just going to happen for us and we're going to be rescued, and how that type of emotional complex or imprint creates problems in actual reality because actual reality doesn't operate by those same principles, right? And so, I mean, there's like a deeper negotiation really happening here with the Sun in Cancer trine Saturn in Pisces of how are we going to really be creative and effectual with navigating these different realms. From a wisdom perspective, we need to be able to discern when it is appropriate to enter fantasy versus when it's our real life that needs to be creatively infused with vision and inspiration. Like, how are we, pouring the water between the realms? If we have a lot of fantasy material, do you have abilities to like add inspiration to your life, right? If you're really bogged down in your real life and you don't see any possibilities, are you taking the time to dream and fertilize those inner spaces? We just need to be able to discern how to balance those approaches. We need to be able to discern if the concrete reality we're in is as limited as we think, or if we use that idea of limitation to collapse into fantasy and thus avoidance. We need to discern if we're too bogged down by being in the world and have not made any space to rejuvenate, recharge in our own waters and inner life. And then July 11th, Venus in 29 degrees of Cancer will trine Neptune retrograde in 29 degrees of Pisces at 10:32 a.m. Eastern. So we haven't talked about Neptune at the anaretic degree of Pisces yet, but we should. The final degree of the zodiac and of the sign of Pisces is a place of deep spiritual culmination that is not without its sense of crises or disasters. The crises or disasters found at this degree are highly spiritual in the sense that they provoke a deeper reflection of the entire cycle and the journey we've been on. You might think too of like the structure of American films, at least, where there's kind of like the plot that's unfolding, and towards the end, like the last 10 minutes of the movie, there's like things have blown up to an extreme. It's not seeming possible for there to be any redemption. And then there's some magical solution that happens because we like the happy endings. It's like that sense of crisis or disaster where the full weight of the story arc comes to a catalytic head, and there's a spiritualization that's happening inside of it. It's provoking a deeper reflection of the entire cycle and journey we've been on. Unconscious material gets lifted into the dramas of our lives, creating the psychological provocation that would have us review the whole cycle. It's interesting in the narrative arc of these things too, how little undercurrents or lies or deceptions, they get blown up to that final reveal of like, we've been having this relationship, but you've been lying to me the whole time. And like the sense of finding the redemption in it. Because you could just kind of bounce or be like, never mind, but there might have been some threads or something in there too that were valuable. So there's this kind of confusion and disillusionment and sorting things out. And the issue with this part of like the whole cycle culminating, however, is that the roots or the origins of the story can be quite unconscious because they might have existed in utero or in prior lives or at pre-verbal times, or even just in events in our lives that we were not taking full register of. So the story does not seem proportionate with our sense of personal narrative, like the way that it's getting louder. It's thus overwhelming in the very true sense of the word. And then we also have Venus at the anaretic degree. So anaretic degree is 29 degrees of any sign, but the anaretic degree of Pisces is extra dramatic because it's also the last sign of the zodiac. So it's the last degree of the whole zodiac. So there's something that's being processed at the moment, again, that could be connected to mother and utero, to pre-verbal childhood memories, to our overall development and gestation in this life. The landscape that this plays out in, however, is just our concrete material relationship to life. So when we feel triggered, dropped, abandoned, not valued, not heard or seen, etc., by a person or a group or a situation, it might strike a deeper chord that more than feels relevant to the situation at hand. This is the crisis that points us back to something deeply internal and mysterious. Neptune transits, while bringing disillusioning and challenging experiences, can also bring a great deal of healing. So this transit does not necessarily say that these issues will be triggered negatively, where, say, an experience we're having does not match our deeper oceanic unconscious need, and we feel abandoned by life or God. Like that kind of situation might glimmer in and out. It could also be that healing occurs along these themes. So it might be a powerful time for therapeutic processes that you're engaged in terms of a process getting heightened or a complex getting activated. It could be a powerful time for healing modalities like craniosacral therapy or anything that creates a deep sense of holding and peace, right? Like creating a sense of redemption and healing, Neptune, around a place that just really wanted to be nurtured and loved, Cancer. Also the pain or the feeling of that getting activated. So you can see it's dual-sided, that the medicine and the poison may be connected, but Neptune generally can be very spiritualizing and healing. Then Venus enters Leo. After all that, like Venus is really going through it. And then she enters Leo at 12:19 p.m. Eastern. So one thing I want to say about that is that Venus was in Leo the summer of 2023, and she retrograded in that sign and spent a lot of time there. So Venus retrogrades are a big deal. They're a big experience, journey of the heart. So maybe if you think back to that transit, if you were tracking it, what was coming up for you and how these themes are being reviewed now that she's back in Leo, or will be. So Venus in Leo can be connected to the expression of love that's given or received, that is attention. Attention is mystical, down to quantum physics, where particles seem to know whether or not they're being observed. It's the joy of astrology and consciousness, by the way, where when you pay attention to the transits or you pay attention to something in your chart, it seems to get more animated and vivid in our lives. Like consciousness quite literally grows things. Leo is such a generous sign, it's like the sun just like throwing and like basking the earth in heat and like this life-giving heat just endlessly, right? And of course, it can scorch, it can be a lot, it can be too much, you know, the drama of Leo, but it's like it's so generous, it's so much. Um, Attention is mystical in the way that children's personalities are stabilized and anchored depending on what is paid attention to and validated within them. Attention is mystical in the ways that flowers turn toward the sun. Attention is mystical in the way that simply paying attention to a place in your body with your intention will result in the ability to feel greater sensation and energy there. Attention is currency, right? If we think about Venus as resource and money and resource more abstractly and Leo as attention, it's like we even say about paying attention or being paid attention to. And it's like, what happens when attention is given and received? That's a love language I really want to have you tune into with Venus and Leo. And we could really stop there. Like that could be enough, but there were a few other things I wanted to say about it. Um, and I was getting into like the shadow dimensions of Leo. So I'm just going to actually let that be like right as Venus enters Leo, she opposes Pluto and Aquarius. So we're getting like a deep dive on these things. So, but I also have Chiron in Leo. So sometimes I really go there with Leo in a way that's like, can't I just keep it fun? Um, but for our self-concept and healthy relationship to self, a more dynamic, enlivened, awakened relationship with ourselves, we are required to pay attention. We're required to not neglect ourselves. We have places within ourselves that are starved of attention and they tend to act out. But the need is simply presence, empathy, and attention. It is beyond powerful for this reason to do inner child work and hold and empathize with ourselves back through time in the places that we didn't feel we received that, right? Or even just in your day-to-day life, cultivating empathy toward yourself can go a really long way. Venus can relate to when there's a problem with reception, which is a Venus thing, she's either really receptive or there's a difficulty of receiving the love, resources, etc., that she needs and craves. If we look at this through the lens of Leo, we get to narcissistic injury. So not to say that Leo is narcissistic, but that whole thing about getting attention or not getting attention is what forms that like a healthy, expressive personality, or that patterns of narcissistic wounding, where we try to get attention in these other ways. This is not impossible to heal by any means. It's just getting clearer about what needs to be seen and empathized with, and what are more empowering ways to resource than the attempts to get attention. So I'll just break from my notes here because I want to explain it differently than what I wrote. But basically, the behaviors that we do to try to like perform or get validation, they don't always hit the spot. Like it might be the ways that you have a part of your personality that is where you get attention and love from, or like the way that you make jokes, or the way that you like whatever you do to kind of get the attention that is craved. That's where we identify our self-worth with like what we do, how shiny we are in public, how much money we're making, how much applause we're getting. And it creates a dependency upon that type of attention. And there's not like a deep perception of the actual part deep down that wants to be seen and known, that would make those coping behaviors of the superficial layer about how we dazzle people and get attention less necessary. Like there'd be a deeper spot that gets hit. And all that being said, the pure like joyfulness of expression, dancing, singing, making music, making jokes, like playing, like being in that Leo fun is like just important in of itself. If it brings like a deep radical sense of joy, like that is the medicine of Leo. It's very much like that alive pulse of energy on the dance floor, and the way that Leo is extremely generous and like infectious. And so if you have someone start the energy, like someone gets on the dance floor first and just starts really going for it, and it inspires other people to stop standing on the side and actually join in and dance, it's like you have this vibrant pulse, this heartbeat of Leo that does not have to be psychologized, doesn't have to be like, you don't have to necessarily look that deeper into it. If it's just pure raw joy, it is a nutrient, it is a value, it is a resource. It's important. And I think, yeah, I just really want to highlight that with Venus and Leo. And when we feel a deficiency or a lack of that, we just tend to try to get it in these ways that's like, look at me, I'm doing this thing, it's cool, do you like me? And it's like not the same as just like pure, unapologetic, permissioned, raw joy, right? And so it's like that pathway of the deeper journey into your own heart, of how you touch that real deeper place. And then we have on July 12th, Venus in 1 degree of Leo, early into her stay here, opposite Pluto retrograde in 1 degree of Aquarius at 10:11 a.m. Eastern. So generally, if you want to read my transcript of this, I'll have it linked, but I'm just going to also just speak to it more improvisationally. But I think there's basically a de-thawing or an unthawing process, because Aquarius can be more cold and distant. And it's the coldness and distance of being at the edge of the culture, like being at the edge of the room. Like I'll literally see Aquarians at parties hang out at the very edge. They're not always in the center. And from the edge, you can see and observe, like it's a bird's eye view. And so it's not without its warmth, though, because it's so intelligent. So when it comes to empathy and someone validating the experience that you're having, you could have someone who's really warm in some sense and just like matches their body to yours and just like feels you from a heart level. And you can also have someone whose intellect and whose sight understands exquisitely, so intelligently what you're going through. Astrology does that, right? These higher knowledge maps can be very Aquarian. So there's this difference between the heat of Venus and Leo and this kind of cold distance of Pluto and Aquarius. And I think when you put them together, it can be really magical and sensational. I think of Leo and Aquarius together as like a professor who's like guiding you through an artistic work that you're making, and how their intelligence, their curiosity, their air, like Aquarius is an air sign, is actually fueling the fire of Leo and the creativity. But again, also because Aquarius can relate to soul fragmentation, like parts of us that split off because of trauma, parts of us that kind of go into exile psychologically. And so if you have like Venus and Leo, who's like this life of the party, and it's like that radical joy, and then Pluto and Aquarius, it could be looking at how these fragmented parts of ourselves are either making it difficult for us to like really let loose and have fun, or like weirder, shadowy ways that we're trying to go about getting it and getting the attention and whatnot. And how there might be something more like deeper healing, profound integration at a heart level in terms of loving and empathizing with our exiled parts and retrieving those soul fragments back into our mainframe, having them back online. But when they come back online, when a fragmented part comes back online, it's had a whole journey. It's gotten so much perspective. So it's not just like you lost that part of you for a long time and it's like so sad and like now it's back, but you missed all this time. It's like that part of you went on a journey and has some perspective. So when it comes back into the fold, there's a depth, there's a sight, there's a richness. So we might also be seeing the ways at a heart level that, of course, we want to be in our hearts, but when we get locked out of our own hearts, when we're far away, when we're in the cold, sometimes we're picking up information. We're learning, we're having an experience, but whatever we do to reclaim, bring those parts of ourselves back to center, I mean, just consider the power of it coming back online. And actually, that's a great segue to talk about the Glamour Magic course, because that's what I have for you for the week. Please let me know what you thought and stay, like, listen, hear me out about Glamour Magic, because it's a Pluto inspired course, and Glamour Magic is, of course, Venusian. But I'm teaching Glamour Magic because a couple years ago, I had a really big process around getting right with my appearance. It had been a problem, a struggle, an emotional pain point my entire life, nearly. Not when I was like a kid, but um, maybe like late elementary school, middle school, high school, etc. It was a problem. The desire that I had to be beautiful, to be reflected as beautiful, and how scarce that felt at times. And how the focus would become on like, can I fix myself, or, making parts of my appearance my enemy because they were in the way of me getting that thing that I want, to the point where I just had a really big healing experience about it, where the pain I had about my appearance was so intense that it was taking up a lot of my mental, energetic, emotional space. And I underwent a big alchemy transformational experience with it, where now not only did my appearance shift and brighten, and I found a way to enchant my magic through my physical appearance, but when I look in the mirror, I am generally like happy to see myself. I have positive regard toward my physical appearance. Sometimes I catch myself unconsciously thinking like, wow, I look stunning when I look in the mirror. And then I'm shocked because that was not my unconscious thought patterning some years ago. And um, it really means a lot to have gotten to that point. And I think that there's a lot of shame around beauty. There's, on the one hand, so many forces um, making people feel not good enough, or making beauty seem really necessary. But it's cooler to just act like it's not a concern. Like, I'm just pretty without trying. I don't have issues with my appearance, et cetera, et cetera. Let me just appear confident. So even though it's something that a lot of people struggle with, it is subterranean. There is shame around it. What I found from looking at this from a more magical perspective, because what helped me change, like radically change my appearance with beauty, was to divest from negative enchantments, how I'd internalized painful thoughts or the beauty industry and things like that. And I call them enchantments because they are, and move toward willfully enchanting myself, um, and creating beauty as a frequency, as a verb, as opposed to just feeling like I have to get the look and have it. I think it's important to teach glamour magic because not just at a superficial level do people want to feel beautiful and magnetic, for what it affords you, for that thing that is the desire that you think beauty is the gateway to. It's a matter of magical sovereignty. It's a matter of retrieving life force from the pain and wounding of these negative enchantments and having access to that life force energy and getting to create with it. It's extremely valuable to have that. And I'm really excited to be teaching glamour magic, putting this together. I have a current cohort of students that I asked to like test out the material on, because this is my first time teaching beauty magic and glamour magic. And it's been already like a really deep and beautiful experience. I'm excited to be offering it again through the Kickstarter. There is a link in the notes if you want to read more about the course. There's also a link in the notes to the Evolutionary Astrology Intensive, which is a around 4-month, deeply guided, connected community experience to learn the language of evolutionary astrology, the language and the technique in a supportive environment. I do get to know all my students. It is an interactive class. Um, and the Kickstarter will also be linked in the notes. And I would really love your support for a year ahead of providing these forecasts and Magic of the Spheres podcast episodes. It's an opportunity to come absorb another talk or work with me personally, get an astrology reading, or come study with me. Whatever feels right for you to pledge. I really am grateful for your support, for your energy, for your reciprocity to really energize these works that I share. I'm already having such a heart opening experience having put out the ask. It is vulnerable for me to do that, to put out the ask and be met, to already be at 20 backers and over 4,000. Please help me get to over 157 backers. I know there's a good amount of you here, so I know we can do it. Don't wait for other people to do it. I'm asking you directly. And I'm just going to leave it at here. Again, invite you to leave a comment. Let me know what resonated with you about the forecast or anything that you want to share. Thank you so much for being here, and I'll be back again soon.